An infinite, endless, limitless time. A long cosmic race with mysterious origins. Millions of years of evolution history and the immense story of this history extending far beyond the time of the creation of the Holy Scriptures with just 6,000 years. A very long process in the absence of God and our charming earth, which emerged only at the very tiny final portion of this process. Our sweet home, which was born and grown as if from a womb, and which has given birth to life itself. Life which has emerged from water and passed on land, which determined the fate of every living being, including us, existing on Earth today millions of years ago, and which will proceed on its way, ignoring our individual existences. In the shortest and most recent chapter of this life appeared our common history. With an anxious expectation, and with all the living beings which had been our companions, we took a breath and proceeded with our evolution again. We first started thinking with the instincts of preservation, and we took the first simple steps in our brains which would carry us today and differentiate us from all the other living beings. These very first steps of becoming thinking animals were also the first steps of all the competition and wars reaching to our present day. Small, wild steps, but also very big steps for our evolution. With these steps we took the upper hand and set out for the road. We climbed the steps of time and differentiated ourselves at each step. First, we stood straight on our feet to watch for other species. When we did, we were called Aurorin afarensis, then Homo habilis, and then Homo ergaster, Australopithecus and Homo erectus, and finally Neanderthal and Homo sapiens. During those periods of evolution, there had been neither God nor religion, because the sole purpose was to survive. And for that purpose, we discovered ourselves as well as the things we need. We discovered defending tools. Our tears, the fire, hunting, and the inevitable death. We saw death, but we could not accept it as it was. Motivated by the desire to deny it, we reached the mountain peaks. We watched the incredible view, and then we took on a challenge and opened up a little hole in the space. We looked into the skies to see the source of our existence. we called what we saw God and extended our hand with the desire to touch him. With these feelings we carved rocks, giving them shapes, and placed them on the mountain peaks where we felt closest to God. So the gods flocked into earth for the first time ever. But creating gods was not enough, because death was still wandering around us. Therefore we assigned a duty to gods, the duty of making us immortal. Otherwise, what would their purpose be? Gods paid attention to their creators and rolled up their sleeves. They separated our souls from our body and made us immortal. As of that moment, soul became everything, and the body, nothing. Because a bridge between life and death had been established now, and the gates to an eternal life had been wide open, not a single civilization or a faith left who had not crossed this bridge. Centuries went by. In this chase of time, humans created gods, and gods created humans for numerous times. The fire discovered by our ancestors has been attributed a holiness and passed on from hand to hand, wreaking havoc in the name of false gods. As the world was burning in flames, Satan was brought forth as the cause of all this. But as the creators of gods, we were the culprits behind this again. Denying our own sins, we put the blame on poor Satan. Even though some religions achieved to contain a true love towards human and nature, such as Hinduism, shamanism, and Zoroastrianism, these religions seem faint in comparison to the evil deeds committed in the name of gods, because often fame was best achieved through evil. And the ones who achieved the highest fame were those called Abrahamic religions. Like all other religions, they started with sincerity and good intentions, but in time they degenerated and imprisoned humanity. Women have been the main victim of their wrath. Claiming it's God's wish, they unleashed their cruelty on women. They rewrote the story of creation, making the male the origin, bedabbling mud all over God's hands. Woman's creation was tied to man's existence. How could it have been preceded man? They did not think that without the female egg, male sperm would be worthless, that the creation could only be possible with the coming together of the two sexes. So they did not mention emotions in their books, because an emotional relation was not possible with the woman, because the woman had conspired with Satan, made the man want to eat the forbidden fruit. She had sinned. Therefore women had been burned alive or stoned to death numerous times in history. But despite all this, they became successful. Since now, it wasn't God, but capital which was important. We are bringing peace on earth, they said, but they vandalized everywhere they passed through in the name of Jesus. They buried their totems of local tribes and built their churches on it. Death was wandering more freely with them. They cursed the hell that turned the world into hell. They cursed the past, yet did not hesitate to utilize the gains of the past. Attributing holiness to those past legends from their cursed past and calling them God's message, they sold it to their followers. More than all Judaism had led this. They stole from the cultures of each civilization they had lived together and mixed them with their fictional stories and had come up with the Old Testament. The legend of Gilgamesh's typhoon story became the typhoon story of so-called holy books. I will reveal to you, Gilgamesh, a thing that is hidden, a secret of the gods I will tell you. O man of Shurpak, son of Ubatutu, tear down the house and build a boat. Abandon wealth and seek living beings. Spurn possessions and keep alive living beings. Make all living beings go up into the boat. The boat was finished by sunset on the seventh day. All the living beings that I had loaded onto it, I had all my kith and kin go up into the boat. All the beasts and animals of the field and the craftsmen the stated time had arrived. I watched the appearance of the weather. The weather was frightful to behold. Just as dawn began to glow, there arose from the horizon a black cloud. Eragal pulled out the mooring poles. Forth went Ninurta and made the dikes overflow. Anunnaki lifted up the torches, setting the land ablaze with their flare. All day long the south wind blew, blowing fast, submerging the mountain in water, overwhelming the people like an attack. No one could see his fellow. The gods were frightened by the flood and retreated, ascending to the heaven of Anu. The gods were cowering like dogs, crouching by the outer wall. Ishtar shrieked like a woman in childbirth. The sweet-voiced mistress of the gods wailed. When the seventh day arrived, the storm stopped. The sea calm felt still, and the whirlwind and flood stopped, and all the human beings had turned to clay. When a seventh day arrived, I sent forth a dove and released it. The dove went off, but came back to me. No perch was visible, so it circled back to me. I sent forth a swallow and released it. The swallow went off, but came back to me. No perch was visible, so it circled back to me. I sent forth a raven and released it. The raven went off and saw the waters slither back. The authors of the Old Testament turned Akhenaton into Prophet Moses. Akhenaton had forbidden worshipping gods other than the sun god Amun-Ra, ending the influence of other gods in the ancient Egypt's pantheon, thus announcing a monotheistic perspective in Egypt.
Akhenaten and Nefertiti are obsessed by their holy role as children of the sun.
The 10 laws of Akhenaton and the 10 commandments of Moses were the same. Each of Akhenaton's laws had been sanctified by Jewish authors of the Old Testament and made their own. From there, passed into the New Testament and Quran. The poem Akhenaton wrote for God Amen, passing through the Old and New Testaments, eventually became the call for prayer for Islam. Allah is great. There is no other God than Him. He is the one who created every being. God is an invisible soul. It was there from the beginning, from beyond the creation. His existence spans eternity. No one has ever seen Him. This poem by Akhenaton had been cited by priests in Egyptian temples as a prayer, and at the end of it they would say Amen. This is the continuation of an Egyptian tradition that had passed to Christianity and Islam. But the attempts of Akhenaton to spread monotheism did not please Egypt's commanders and priests, and eventually failed. Therefore, Akhenaton was forced to leave Egypt, and this exile incident had been the inspiration behind the famous Exodus story. The authors of the Old Testament had altered historical facts, mixing it with their own stories. One of these altered stories is Nile's turning into a river of blood. Another is the Red Sea being split in two. None of these incidents can be found in the texts left behind Egyptian historians, famed with their meticulous work of noting down such big events. The case of Quran, which borrows its stories from the Old Testament, is even more further than the truth. Quran includes two conflicting versions of the story of the Pharaoh of Egypt, where in one version the Pharaoh dies drowning in the Red Sea as it closes on him, and in the other he was saved after announcing his devotion to Islamic faith. As it would be unacceptable to have conflicting points in a book written by God himself, also Egypt's historians has not told of a pharaoh who had faith in Islam. It is of course also not possible, as ancient Egyptians had lived long before the emergence of Islamic faith. The Quran had attempted to Islamize these stories, borrowing them from the Old Testament, but had ended up with an inconsistent text. Another source Old Testament's writers used in Moses' stories is the childhood story of Sargon of Akkad. Authors of the Old Testament had hijacked the basket of Sargon, floating on the Euphrates River, and brought it to the story of Moses, letting the basket afloat over the Nile. The story goes like this. Upon the decision that all the Hebrew kids in Egypt would be killed, his mother put Moses into a basket and let it float in the river Nile. A princess finds and raises him, and Moses becomes a pharaoh. The same story is also told in a tablet from BC 911. Akkadian King Sargon tells his story. Sargon, the strong king, the king of Akkad I am. My mother was a high priestess, my father I do not know. My mother bore me in a secret, placed me in a reed basket and caulked my hatch with pitch. Then she abandoned me to the river, from the which I could not escape. The river carried me along and brought me to Aki, the water drawer. Aki took me out of the water and brought me up like his own son, and I became king. Christianity is another belief system which historical facts stand against. This overshadows Christianity in a significant way. All in all, Jesus Christ's existence is challenged. In the scriptures found in the Asia cave in Kurman region of Palestine, which dates back to BC 400, Christianity and Bible had been mentioned but not Christ. That proves Jesus as a later addition to the story of Christianity, coming into picture at least 400 years after Christianity was born. Already we know that many historians, such as Josephus Flavius, from the times of Christ, never mention his name. Another symbol that is missing in early times of Christianity is the figure of the cross. Because the first symbol of Christianity was not a cross but a fish, in numerous artifacts of early Christianity, a fish figure can be observed, but cross figure was never present. The mitre worn by the Pope and the bishops today is also in the shape of a fish, and originates from the Mesopotamian symbols Ohanes and Dagon. Cross, on the other hand, originating from the sun-based pagan zodiac schemes, finds its way to Christianity through Roman Hellenism. Many icons and reliefs of Christianity depicts Christ with a cross placed over a circle, symbolizing the sun for that reason. Various signs of pagan symbols can be found in Christianity. The foremost of those are the Dionysus of Greek, Mitra of Persians, Attis of Phrygians, and the father Osiris, mother Isis, and son Horus of ancient Egyptians. The origin of the Holy Trinity can be found in these three gods of ancient Egypt. The story of Egypt's gods, Osiris, Horus, and Isis, goes like this. Set, who cannot tolerate the reign of his brother Osiris, who is married to Isis, kills Osiris and cuts him into pieces and distributes his organs all over Egypt. Isis searches and finds her husband's organs and assembles them to have a baby from his dead body. Horus is born. So Horus, just like Christ, is born without a father from a virgin mother. Yet gods without a father are not just Horus and Christ. Phrygian Attis, son of Virgin Nana, Krishna, son of Virgin Devaki, all was born without a father, and surprisingly, all on the 25th of December. Centuries pass and Islam emerges on the stage of history as a new religion. Their book was Quran and their prophet was Muhammad. They called it a new religion. However, its roots are in the pre-Islamic ages and its traditions are a continuation of the traditions of those times. Only thing that Muhammad has done was to reform those traditions which came from before around the monotheistic ideas of Christianity and Judaism. And end the reign of all other gods. In other words, Allah was not being specific to Islam, but the very Allah, the main god of the pagan Arabs. And its name comes from Al, which was god of the god. Accepted commonly in the Mesopotamian geography, it is clearly stated in Quran that Allah is Allah himself and only him should be worshipped. In Quran, the daughters of El-Ilah, El-Lat, El-Menat and El-Uzza, all the idols were cursed and destroyed and thrown out of Kaaba. Only the leader of all those idols, El-Ilah, was forsaken and his home Kaaba was untouched. In the mainstream and degenerated interpretations of Islam referencing Quran, Asma'ul Husna, God's numerous names are cited. However, in Quran, aside from Allah and Rab, with 147 repetitions, God's most used name is Ilah. The reason behind the theologists not mentioning his name was their desire to hide that Allah is in fact El-Ilah, and just a God. But no matter how much they want to hide it, Quran delivers numerous verses with references to Ilah. Even the crescent moon symbols on top of mosques point to the fact that in Islam, El-Ilah had been accepted as the god. Because moon is the symbol of moon god El and El-Ilah, Yasin Surah of Quran also addresses the moon god, and its origins can be traced back to enlightening moon god Sin of Mesopotamian civilizations. Many practices of Muslims today can in fact be considered as continuation of those Mesopotamian traditions, such as namaz and dua. Circling around Kaaba is also a tradition dating back to pre-Islamic times. Even before Islam, pagan Arabs used to visit Kaaba once a year, circle around it, go back and forth between Safa and Nerv hills for 7 times, and stone the idols of devil as part of their pilgrimage. Even the stone called Hajarul Esved, which today's pilgrims visiting Kaaba try to touch with euphoria, is a stone that had been considered holy since pre-Islamic times. Tribal leaders would swear their oaths touching the stone. Despite Qurans not mentioning anything about this stone, even today's pilgrims consider of it as something holy is nothing but idol worship. Just as it draws its traditions from the cultures of Arabian Peninsula and Mesopotamia, Islam has also borrowed from other religions. An example of this is the circumcision tradition and the concepts of hell of ancient Egypt, both being passed into Islam through Judaism. Hell, described as the eternal punishment placed by Islam, is actually not in another world, which is Gaib, but in today's Israel, somewhere near Quds, and its real name is Gehenna. Pagan Jews of ancient times would visit Gehinnom Valley to pay respect to idol Molech by sacrificing their children by throwing them alive into a burning fire in the bottom of a large hole. When Judaism arrived and forbid that tradition in the name of their god, Gehinnom had been turned into a dumping ground. And Islam has found Gehinnom and took it out from that dumping ground after Jews had blown out its fire in the name of God, and with an incredible misconception transformed it into its own hell full with torment. Another tradition which plays a main role in Islam despite its absence in Quran is covering of heads and face covering veils. This clothing style originates from the Babylonian king Hammurabi's law telling women how to dress, and had been passed first on to Judaism, then to Christianity. For that reason, this sort of clothing has been mentioned many times in Torah and the New Testament. Yet not a single word can be found in Quran about it. Even though themselves know it very well, Islamic theologians try to force it on the Muslims by misinterpreting Quran's surahs Nur and Azab. However, those surahs and ayats just tell women how to protect themselves from the common sexual assault threats of those times by staring away from the disturbing looks of men and covering themselves with the scarves they carried around their necks until they feel safe. Theologians often claim God created everything to exist in harmony. Then which of these you think would suit this perspective of God? This? Or that? Aside from its suggestions of a way for self-protection, is the only holy book that does not tell women how to dress. Despite this, to suppress women and force them into black veils, all sorts of lies have been told by theologians, such as the lie of superiority of men. Yet again, Quran, aside from passages borrowed from Torah and New Testament, emphasizes man-woman equality and talks about a superiority of one human to another only in the context of the race to serve God taqwa. Another part where Quran emphasizes equality is in the context of wealth. It suggests that wealth should be redistributed until all are equal, a perfect equality. Quran speaks for the equality among people to the point of ordering believers to continue to share their excess wealth until an equilibrium is reached. It is these ideas of equality that makes us not think of palaces when we think of the period of Muhammad, but the humble people who fought for the poor and for their beliefs. These aspects of Islam are its true and communal qualities. Today's interpretations of Islam, however, stand in front of us as removed from its roots and degenerated as it can be. Also in Quran, it is told that humans should be trustful and fair. But the majority of today's Muslims hardly ever refrain from lies. It forbids all forms of unfair commercial gains or gains through interest. Yet majority of today's believers commute daily to banks, to ATMs, keeping a close eye on their money. Today there is hardly anything left of true Islam. What is widely accepted today is just an estranged belief system surmised as Islam, which is derailed from its true course, a materialistic set of practices assuming the world as a permanent home rather than a temporal place. Because of that, if you are seeking God, do not look for it in the rubbish tall tales and degenerated beliefs of today. A God who is the creator of the universe cannot be thought simply just within the context of such rubbish talk. If you truly want to find God without fearing death, seek for it in all the beauties your heart shows you and in all the perfections that your mind and logic find around you. And do not forget, if there is a God, God will take with him not the believers, but the good-hearted.